Right now, somewhere in the mountains of the American West, a deer is feeding. Its ears rotate like satellite dishes, scanning for the faintest sound. Its nostrils flare, pulling in the cold air, testing it for danger. Every instinct this animal possesses has been sharpened by millions of years of evolution for one purpose: to detect the thing that is about to kill it. And that thing is already there, crouched behind a granite ledge, no more than 40 feet away. A cougar has been watching for nearly an hour. Motionless, patient. Its tawny fur blends so perfectly with the sun-bleached rock that you could stare directly at it and see nothing. Its heart rate is slow and controlled. Its muscles are coiled like industrial springs. And in its enormous, amber eyes, reflected in the fading amber light of dusk, there is no malice, no cruelty, only a cold, exquisite calculation that has been perfected over 11 million years of feline evolution. When the moment comes, it will not be a chase. There will be no dramatic pursuit across an open plain. Instead, there will be a single, explosive burst of power. A leap that can cover 45 feet in a single bound. And then the cougar's jaws will close around the back of the deer's neck, with roughly 400 pounds of force per square inch. The vertebrae will separate. The spinal cord will be severed, and in a matter of seconds, it will be over. A clean kill, silent, efficient, almost surgical. This is the cougar, known across the Americas by more names than any other animal on Earth. Mountain lion, puma, panther, catamount, painter, ghost cat. This is a creature that has been quietly ruling the Western Hemisphere for longer than most of the landscapes it inhabits have existed in their current form. It is the fourth largest cat on the planet, the most widely distributed large land mammal in the Western Hemisphere, and arguably the most successful apex predator in the Americas. And yet, despite all of that, most people will never see one. Not because cougars are rare, but because they do not want to be seen. They are, in every sense of the word, phantoms. Over the next stretch of our time together, we are going to pull back the curtain on one of the most elusive and misunderstood predators on Earth. We will trace the cougar's origins back to a time when the ancestor of every modern cat on this continent crossed a frozen land bridge from Asia. We will watch as it survived an extinction event that wiped out saber-toothed cats and American lions, predators that dwarfed it in size and power. We will get inside the mind of an ambush hunter whose patience borders on the supernatural and whose physical abilities would put most Olympic athletes to shame. We will meet a mother who spends 75% of her adult life either pregnant or raising her young, and whose devotion to her kittens is fierce enough to make her charge a grizzly bear. We will walk the sprawling, invisible territories that these solitary cats patrol, and understand why the presence or absence of a single cougar can reshape an entire ecosystem. And we will confront the uncomfortable truth about what happens to wild places when we push this ghost cat out of them. So settle in, dim the lights, and let your mind wander into the wild, dark, and ancient world of the cougar. Before we dive deeper, let us address the elephant in the room, or rather, the cat with an identity crisis. The cougar holds a Guinness World Record, but not for speed or strength or the length of its remarkable leap. It holds the record for the animal with the most names, over 40 in English alone. Cougar, puma, mountain lion, panther, catamount, painter, ghost cat, red tiger, deer tiger, mountain screamer. The list goes on and on. A sprawling catalog of regional nicknames that reflects just how deeply this animal has woven itself into the cultures and landscapes of two entire continents. The word cougar itself traces back to the Tupi language of indigenous Brazil. The original word, something close to Kuguakuara, was picked up by Portuguese explorers, filtered through French, and eventually anglicized into the word we use today. Puma comes from Quechua, the language of the Inca Empire, and it is the name most commonly used in scientific literature and across Latin America. Mountain lion is the favored term in much of the western United States. Even though the cougar is not a true lion, it belongs to the subfamily Felinae, not Pantherae, which means it is more closely related to your house cat than it is to an African lion or a tiger. It cannot roar. Instead, it purrs, chirps, hisses, growls, and during mating season, produces a blood-curdling scream that has terrified backcountry hikers for centuries and given rise to countless folk tales of haunted mountain passes and wailing spirits in the night. In the southern United States, particularly in Florida, the name panther has stuck, a holdover from early English settlers who borrowed the Greek word for leopard and applied it liberally to any large cat they encountered in the New World. Catamount, a contraction of cat of the mountain, was the preferred name in New England colonial days. And painter, a southern Appalachian dialect corruption of panther, is still occasionally heard in the hollers and backcountry of states like West Virginia and North Carolina, where old-timers will tell you about the painters their grandparents used to hear screaming from the ridgelines at night. The scientific name, Puma concolor, translates roughly to cat of one color, a nod to the animal's remarkably uniform coat. That sleek, unbroken tawny or grayish-brown fur that lacks the spots and stripes of most other wild cats. It is a practical name for a practical animal, one whose survival strategy has always been about blending in rather than standing out. But whatever you choose to call it, you are talking about the same extraordinary cat, and its story begins not on this continent, but on the ancient grasslands of Asia, roughly 11 million years ago. The family Felidae, the biological clan that includes every cat from your tabletop tabby to the Siberian tiger, is thought to have originated in Asia approximately 11 million years ago. From that ancestral cradle, cats radiated outward, diversifying and adapting as they spread across the Old World and eventually into the New. The cougar's particular branch of the family tree is the Puma lineage, which also includes the jaguarundi, a small, weasel-like cat of Central and South America, and surprisingly, the cheetah, the fastest land animal on Earth, now found only in Africa and a sliver of Iran. These three species share a common ancestor that scientists believe migrated from Asia into the Americas somewhere between 6 and 8.5 million years ago, crossing the Bering Land Bridge during a period when falling sea levels exposed a wide corridor of tundra between what is now Siberia and Alaska. This is a staggering thought. The ancestor of the cougar and the cheetah walked the same path, across the same frozen bridge, into the same unknown continent. And then, over millions of years, their descendants diverged so radically that one became the world's fastest sprinter on the African savanna, while the other became a silent ambush predator, haunting the canyons of the American West. Some researchers suggest the cheetah lineage actually evolved in the Americas before migrating back to the Old World, though this remains debated. What is clear is that the relationship between cheetahs and cougars is not merely academic. It is written in their DNA. The cougars' more immediate ancestors appeared in North America between 3 and 1 million years ago. Fossil evidence from this period is sparse and often difficult to interpret, as felid bones can be notoriously similar across species, but paleontologists have identified the genus Puma in the fossil record of the Pliocene and Pleistocene, and a related cat called Myricinonyx. The so-called American cheetah roamed the Great Plains alongside the cougar's ancestors roughly 3 million years ago. Myricinonyx was a long-legged, slender predator built for speed, and its divergence from the puma lineage may have occurred around 3.2 million years ago. According to mitochondrial DNA analyses, the oldest confirmed fossil of the modern species Puma concolor in North America dates to the Rancalabrian land mammal age, roughly 200,000 years ago. In South America, the oldest known cougar fossil, a partial skull found in Argentina, dates to the late Calabrian age, a remarkable piece of evidence. A cougar coprolite excavated in Argentina's Catamarca province was radiocarbon dated to between 17,000 and 16,500 years ago, containing Toxoscaris leonina eggs, which tells us that cougars and their parasites have been coexisting in South America for at least that long. But here is where the story takes a twist that fundamentally reshaped our understanding of cougar evolution. Genetic analysis published in Nature Communications revealed something startling. Despite those ancient North American fossils, the genetic diversity of all modern cougars traces back to eastern South America. The mitochondrial and microsatellite data suggest that the common ancestor of all living North American cougars existed within only the last 20,000 years. This means that while ancestral cougars lived in North America for hundreds of thousands of years, the original population was likely wiped out during the catastrophic Pleistocene extinctions. Roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, North America was then repopulated by a small founder group of cougars that migrated northward from South America. Likely within 2,000 years after the extinction event, every cougar in the Yukon, every mountain lion in Montana, every Florida panther, all of them are descendants of that small band of South American pioneers. The Pleistocene was not kind to large predators. The world was changing. Glaciers were retreating. Landscapes were transforming from vast grasslands and open woodlands into dense forests and fragmented habitats. And the megafauna, the giant ground sloths, the woolly mammoths, the mastodons, the massive herds of ancient horses and camels that had sustained predator populations for millions of years, were disappearing at an alarming rate. The causes of the Pleistocene extinction are still debated, with most scientists pointing to a combination of rapid climate change, habitat loss, and the arrival of highly efficient human hunters. But the result was devastating. In North America alone, roughly 35 genera of large mammals vanished. Among them were some of the most fearsome predators the continent had ever produced. Smilodon fatalis the saber-toothed cat, was a muscular, ambush-style killer with canine teeth nearly 7 inches long. Panthera atrox, the American lion, was roughly 25% larger than a modern African lion and may have been the largest cat to ever walk the earth. The dire wolf, the short-faced bear, Myricininyx, the American cheetah, all of them are gone. And yet, the cougar survived. The question of how and why the cougar made it through the Pleistocene extinction, while so many of its competitors did not, has been the subject of serious scientific investigation. A critical study published in Biology Letters used dental microwear texture analysis to compare the feeding behavior of Pleistocene-era cougars with that of the extinct Smilodon and the American lion. Using fossil specimens from the La Brea tar pits in Southern California, the researchers found that Pleistocene cougars showed dental wear patterns consistent with moderate durophagy, meaning they were eating bones, hide, and other tough materials along with flesh. Their dental microwear was most similar to that of modern African lions, which are known to be generalized feeders that consume most or all of a carcass. The saber-toothed cat and the American lion, by contrast, showed dental wear consistent with more specialized feeding. Their diets were apparently limited to specific types of prey and specific parts of a carcass. When those prey species disappeared, these specialized predators had nowhere to turn. The cougar, with its willingness to eat practically everything, bones, hide, sinew, and all, had a broader dietary safety net. This dietary flexibility, combined with a willingness to hunt a wide variety of prey species from large ungulates down to rodents and even insects, gave the cougar a crucial edge. In other words, the cougar survived the apocalypse because it was not a picky eater. While saber-toothed cats and American lions starved alongside the disappearing megafauna, the cougar simply adapted, shifting its diet to whatever was available: deer, rabbits, rodents, birds, and carried on. Now let us talk about the machine itself. Because the cougar is, from snout to tail tip, one of the most beautifully engineered predators in the natural world. An adult male cougar typically measures around 7 feet 10 inches from nose to tail tip, with females averaging about 6 feet 9 inches. Males generally weigh between 117 and 159 pounds, though exceptionally large individuals can exceed 200 pounds. Females are smaller, typically weighing between 75 and 106 pounds. Cougars living closer to the equator tend to be smaller than those in northern latitudes, a pattern consistent with Bergmann's rule, which predicts that warm-blooded animals in colder climates will be larger to better conserve body heat. The coat is that signature uniform tawny or grayish-brown, sometimes shading to reddish or even silvery gray, depending on the region and the individual. The belly and chest are lighter, almost cream-colored, while the ears and the tip of that extraordinarily long tail are tipped in black. There are no spots, no stripes, no rosettes. Just that clean, unbroken camouflage that allows the cougar to vanish into desert sandstone, forest shadow, or mountain scrub with equal ease. Interestingly, cougar kittens are born with dark spots and rings on their tails, a remnant of ancestral patterning that fades completely by the time the young cat is about a year old. The head is proportionally small and rounded, with large, forward-facing eyes that give the cougar exceptional binocular vision and depth perception, essential for an ambush predator that needs to judge distances precisely before committing to a leap. Those eyes contain far more rod cells than cone cells, making the retina exceptionally sensitive to low light. Behind the retina sits a reflective layer called the tapetum lucidum, which bounces incoming light back through the photoreceptors a second time, effectively doubling the amount of light available to the eye. This is why cougar eyes glow in the dark when caught in a flashlight beam. And it is also why the cougar can see with startling clarity in conditions that would render a human functionally blind. Its field of vision extends roughly 285 degrees, compared to about 210 for a typical human, giving it an almost panoramic awareness of its surroundings. The ears are large, erect, and remarkably sensitive. Cougars rely heavily on hearing to detect prey and potential threats, compensating for a sense of smell that, by feline standards, is relatively weak. The short muzzle is not a design flaw. It is an engineering advantage. By shortening the jaw, the cougar increases the mechanical leverage of its bite, concentrating immense force into a compact, striking surface. The canine teeth are roughly 2 inches long, backed by specialized carnassial molars that shear through meat and sinew like surgical scissors. But the cougar's most spectacular physical attribute is its hindquarters. The hind legs are proportionally the longest of any cat species, packed with dense muscle. Enlarged gluteals, powerful quadriceps, and thick calves that function like biological pistons. The vertebrae of the spine are connected by muscles rather than ligaments, giving the cougar a flexible, almost serpentine backbone that can arch, twist, extend, and compress with an extraordinary range of motion. This combination of leg power and spinal flexibility produces athletic feats that border on the unbelievable. From a dead standstill, a cougar can launch itself 18 feet straight up into the air, high enough to clear a 2-story building. With a running start, it can cover 45 feet in a single horizontal leap. Its top sprint speed ranges between 40 and 50 miles per hour, with some estimates pushing as high as 55. Its large, padded paws act as natural shock absorbers and traction devices, gripping rock, snow, and loose soil with equal confidence. The front paws are noticeably larger than the rear, equipped with 5 retractable claws, including a dew claw, and they are specifically adapted for grasping and holding prey. When a cougar walks, it places its hind paw precisely in the print left by its front paw, a gait called direct registering that minimizes noise and leaves a deceptively small trail. The whiskers, vibrissae, in scientific terminology, deserve special attention. A cougar's whiskers are packed with nerve endings called Merkel cells, clustered at the base of each hair in densities that make them among the most sensitive tactile organs in the animal kingdom. These whiskers do not need to physically touch an object to detect it. They can sense minute changes in air pressure and airflow, allowing the cougar to navigate in total darkness, detect the proximity of obstacles, and critically, orient its killing bite with precision. When a cougar strikes in near darkness, it is the whiskers, not the eyes, that guide those long canines to the exact space between the prey's vertebrae. And that heart. The cougar's heart is proportionally large, roughly 0.57% of its total body weight, more than double the ratio for an African lion, combined with expanded lung capacity. This gives the cougar the cardiovascular power to fuel those explosive, short-burst attacks that define its hunting style. And here is a detail that belongs in the slightly darker category of cougar biology. The cougar carries feline immunodeficiency virus, a close relative of human HIV, and it has carried it for so long that the two have essentially reached an evolutionary truce. The virus is well adapted to the cougar's immune system and under normal circumstances causes no apparent disease. It circulates quietly through cougar populations, passed from cat to cat through bites during territorial disputes and mating. A permanent passenger in the bloodstream of an animal that has no idea it is there. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of ancient coexistence. The cougar and its virus have been evolving together for so long that each has learned to tolerate the other. One more biological fact worth lingering on: cougars possess the largest hind legs of any cat species on Earth. Those hindquarters are not just powerful, they are architecturally unique. The ratio of hind leg length to body length in a cougar exceeds that of any other felid, giving the animal a distinctive sloping silhouette when it walks, with its hindquarters riding slightly higher than its shoulders. This construction is the engine behind everything the cougar does: the leaping, the sprinting, the ability to change direction at full speed, and the devastating pounce that defines its hunting style. It is also worth noting that the cougar's tail, which can measure up to 3 feet long and accounts for nearly a third of the animal's total length, is not merely ornamental. It functions as a dynamic counterbalance, constantly adjusting during high-speed maneuvers, sharp turns, and those gravity-defying leaps to keep the cat's center of mass precisely where it needs to be. Think of it as a biological rudder, a stabilizer that allows a 140-pound animal to change direction mid-leap with the agility of something a fraction of its size. Now, let us watch it hunt. The cougar is not a distance runner. It is not a pack hunter. It does not chase its prey across miles of open terrain the way a wolf does. The cougar is a solitary ambush predator, and its hunting strategy is built entirely around patience, stealth, and a single devastating strike. It begins with the stalk. A cougar will spend anywhere from minutes to over an hour silently closing the distance between itself and its target. It moves through brush, behind boulders, along ledges, and beneath tree cover, placing each paw with deliberate precision. Its body stays low, nearly pressed to the ground. Its tail, that long, heavy counterbalance, streams out behind it, stabilizing its movements and keeping its center of gravity low and controlled. If the prey lifts its head or shows any sign of alertness, the cougar freezes. It can hold a position completely motionless for extraordinary periods of time. It does not fidget. It does not shift. It waits until the prey relaxes, then resumes its approach. The cougar's eyes during this phase are locked on the target with an intensity that borders on hypnotic. It is reading the prey's body language, assessing its health, gauging its awareness, calculating the distance and angle of attack. Cougars are remarkably adept at selecting vulnerable individuals: the old, the young, the sick, the distracted. This is not cruelty. It is efficient. A healthy adult mule deer buck can weigh over 200 pounds and deliver kicks powerful enough to break a predator's jaw. Selecting the right target is a matter of survival. When the cougar has closed to within striking distance, typically between 20 and 50 feet, it launches. The attack is explosively fast. Those massive hind legs uncoil, propelling the cat forward and upward in a burst of acceleration that can go from 0 to 40 miles per hour in a fraction of a second. The cougar does not run its prey down. It closes the gap in a single rush and lands on the animal's back, wrapping its powerful forelimbs around the prey's body and using its weight and momentum to drag it to the ground. In the same fluid motion, the cougar delivers its signature killing bite, a powerful clamp to the back of the neck between the vertebrae, aimed at severing the spinal cord. For smaller prey, the sheer force of the impact and the momentum of the tackle can snap the neck outright. For larger animals, the cougar may instead clamp its jaws around the throat and suffocate the prey, holding on with immovable patience until the animal stops struggling. The hunting success rate is remarkably high for a solitary predator. In central Idaho, researchers estimated that cougars hunting elk and mule deer in winter snow succeeded roughly 82% of the time. In less favorable conditions, open terrain, alert prey, poor cover, the success rate drops considerably to as low as 10% in some South American studies of cougars hunting plains, vizcacha, in semi-arid scrubland. The cougar is a generalist hypercarnivore, a term that means it eats almost exclusively meat, but is remarkably flexible about what kind. In North America, deer constitute the backbone of the diet. A survey of North American research found that 68% of cougar prey items were ungulates, with mule deer and white-tailed deer far and away the most common targets. Elk, moose, bighorn sheep, and mountain goats also appear on the menu, particularly in the northern portions of the range. The only North American cougar population that showed significant dietary deviation was the Florida panther, which has adapted to the unique prey base of the Everglades ecosystem and frequently hunts feral hogs and 9-banded armadillos. But the cougar's diet extends far beyond large ungulates. These cats are genuinely opportunistic feeders. They have been documented eating porcupines. Nearly every wild cougar carries porcupine quills embedded somewhere beneath its hide, a testament to the frequency and painfulness of these encounters. They eat raccoons, rabbits, beavers, muskrats, skunks, coyotes, bobcats, and even other cougars. They eat birds, including wild turkeys. They eat rodents, opossums, and snails. In South America, the diet shifts substantially. Smaller mammals and large rodents like the capybara become important prey items, and ungulates account for only about 35% of the diet, roughly half the proportion seen in North America. Competition with the larger jaguar in South America is believed to be a driving factor in this dietary shift. One particularly unusual finding came from tracking data on a mountain lion in Santa Ana's study area. Over a 15-month period, a single cougar nicknamed Broken Leg consumed 35 badgers and 19 elk, but only 5 mule deer, demonstrating just how individualized cougar diets can be. Some cougars develop highly specific prey preferences, while others remain generalists. In areas where introduced gemsbok, large African antelopes, have been released in New Mexico, at least one cougar was documented killing 29 of them, apparently developing a taste for the exotic newcomers. After a kill, the cougar drags the carcass to a sheltered spot beneath a fallen tree, behind a rock outcropping into a thicket, and covers it with leaves, brush, and debris. This food cache is revisited over the course of several days as the cougar feeds. A single adult cougar will typically kill one large ungulate roughly every 2 weeks. For a mother with nearly grown kittens, that interval shrinks dramatically. She may need to make a kill every 3 days to keep her family fed. In a single sitting, a cougar can consume between 20 and 30 pounds of meat, an astonishing volume that reflects the feast and famine nature of a solitary predator's life. At the kill site, a cougar's carcass becomes the center of a hidden economy. Researchers have documented over 200 different species benefiting from cougar kills, from beetles and ravens to foxes and bears, by dragging prey into sheltered areas and consuming it over time. Cougars distribute nutrients and organic matter across the landscape in ways that directly support an enormous web of scavenging and decomposing organisms. This is one of the many ways in which the cougar functions as an ecosystem engineer, shaping its environment through the simple act of feeding. The cougar is, at its core, a solitary animal outside of the brief period of mating and the extended period of maternal care. Adult cougars have virtually no social contact with one another. They navigate their world alone, moving through vast home ranges that they defend, mark, and monitor with a quiet but relentless vigilance. Male home ranges are enormous, typically spanning 50 to 150 square miles, though ranges of up to 370 square miles have been documented in areas where prey is scarce. Female territories are roughly half that size. A single male's territory will often overlap with the ranges of 3 to 4 females, giving him access to multiple potential mates. Male territories, however, almost never overlap with those of other adult males. The boundaries are patrolled and enforced. Cougars mark their territories through a system of scrapes and scent deposits. A cougar will use its hind paws to scratch a shallow furrow in the dirt or forest floor, then deposit urine or feces on or near the scrape. They also scratch tree bark, leaving visible gouges, along with scent from glands in their paws. These markings serve as chemical bulletin boards, communicating the cat's identity, sex, reproductive status, and territorial boundaries to any cougar that passes through. Despite their solitary nature, cougars are not silent. They produce a surprisingly varied vocal repertoire that includes purring, chirping, whistling, hissing, growling, and yowling. Mothers communicate with their kittens through a distinctive series of soft mews, grunts, and a near-constant purring that researchers have described as one of the most intimate sounds in the natural world. A deep, rhythmic vibration that you can feel in your chest if you're close enough. Between mother and kitten, this purring functions as a kind of sonar of reassurance, a constant signal that says, "I am here. You are safe." The most famous cougar vocalization is the scream, a piercing, drawn-out wail typically produced by females during estrus. This sound, which can carry for 2 miles across open terrain, has been described by backcountry residents as sounding like a woman in distress. and it has fueled folklore about haunted forests and mountain spirits for centuries. Males, when encountering each other at territorial boundaries, may engage in guttural growling and hissing matches that occasionally escalate into physical combat. Most adult male cougars bear scars from these encounters. Cougar activity patterns are flexible and context-dependent. In protected areas with minimal human presence, cougars may be active during daylight hours. In areas with significant human activity, they shift to a more crepuscular or nocturnal schedule, concentrating their movement and hunting during the dim hours of dawn and dusk. This behavioral flexibility is yet another example of the cougar's remarkable adaptability. It does not have a fixed schedule, but adjusts its rhythms to minimize conflict and maximize hunting opportunities. The cougar's reproductive life is demanding, patient, and tinged with real danger. Female cougars typically reach sexual maturity between 1.5 and 3 years of age, and from that point forward, they spend the vast majority of their adult lives, an estimated 75%, either pregnant or raising dependent young. Cougars can mate at any time of year, though most births in North America occur between late spring and early fall, roughly coinciding with the birth pulse of deer fawns and elk calves. Females signal their readiness to mate by scratching furrows in the ground and tree bark, depositing scent from their urine, and producing that haunting estrus scream. A female's estrus cycle lasts approximately 23 days, with a receptive window of about 8 days. Males patrolling their territories pick up on these scent signals sometimes days before the female is fully receptive, positioning themselves nearby to be first in line. Cougars are polygamous. Males mate with multiple females, and females may mate with multiple males over the course of a single estrus cycle, which means a single litter can contain kittens sired by different fathers. The pair bonds are fleeting, typically lasting between 3 and 10 days, after which the male departs and has no further involvement in the rearing of his offspring. After a gestation period of roughly 90 to 96 days, the female gives birth in a secluded den, a cave, a rock overhang, a dense thicket of fallen timber, or a sheltered hollow beneath tree roots. The average litter consists of 2 to 3 kittens, though litters of up to 6 have been documented. Newborn cougar kittens weigh roughly 1 pound, are about a foot long, and arrive into the world blind, deaf, and completely helpless. Their eyes are closed. Their ears are folded. They have no teeth, and their coats are covered in dark spots and rings, camouflage inherited from a distant ancestor, designed to break up their silhouettes in the dappled light of a forest den. The mother purrs almost constantly during those first days, a deep, vibrating hum that serves as a beacon and a comfort to her sightless, fumbling newborns. By 10 days, the kitten's eyes begin to open, revealing the pale blue irises that all cougar kittens are born with. Their ears unfold. Their first tiny teeth push through the gums. They begin to play. For the first 6 to 8 weeks, the mother rarely leaves the den. When she does venture out to hunt, she may be gone for hours or even days, leaving her vulnerable kittens hidden in the darkness. The den site is chosen with extreme care. It must be virtually impossible for a predator to find. Bears, wolves, coyotes, eagles, and even other cougars, particularly adult males, are all capable of killing unattended kittens. Male cougars have been documented killing kittens sired by other males, a behavior that brings the female back into estrus more quickly and allows the infanticidal male to sire his own offspring with her. This grim reality means that mothers with young kittens are intensely wary of male cougars and will fight ferociously to defend their litters. At around 6 weeks, the kittens begin to eat meat, and the family leaves the den. The kittens follow their mother on hunting forays, stumbling and struggling to keep up at first, then gradually gaining strength and coordination. The mother stashes them near kill sites while she hunts alone, and over time, they begin to observe, imitate, and practice her techniques. By 6 months, the kittens weigh over 30 pounds and have begun to hunt small prey on their own. Over the next year, their skills will sharpen. Their spotted coats fade to the adult's uniform tawny brown. Their blue eyes darken to amber. Kittens remain with their mother for 18 to 24 months, a long apprenticeship by field standards. When the mother enters estrus again, however, the relationship must end. If her offspring do not disperse, the arriving male may kill them. Young males typically leave first, often dispersing far from their birthplace, sometimes over 100 miles, in search of unclaimed territory. Young females tend to establish territories closer to their mother's range, sometimes even adjacent to it. Siblings may travel together for a month or two after leaving home, but eventually, the solitary instinct takes over, and they go their separate ways. The first year of independence is brutal. Young cougars must learn to hunt large prey alone, navigate unfamiliar terrain, and avoid territorial adults who will not hesitate to attack or kill interlopers. Kitten mortality rates during this dispersal phase are high. On average, only about 1 kitten per litter survives to adulthood. The cougar occupies the most extensive range of any large wildland mammal in the Western Hemisphere, from the boreal forests of Canada's Yukon Territory to the windswept grasslands of Patagonia at the southern tip of South America. From the snowy peaks of the Rocky Mountains to the humid swamps of the Florida Everglades, from sea level to altitudes above 14,000 feet. The cougar has found a way to make itself at home in virtually every terrestrial habitat the Americas have to offer. To put this range in perspective, no other wildcat on Earth comes close. Not the leopard, which spans Africa and parts of Asia. Not the tiger, whose range has contracted to fragmented pockets across South and Southeast Asia. The cougar's range covers more than 110 degrees of latitude, from roughly 60 degrees north in Canada to 50 degrees south in Chile. Spanning deserts, rainforests, grasslands, swamps, alpine tundra, and everything in between. This adaptability is, in many ways, the cougar's defining characteristic. It is equally comfortable in Alberta's alpine forests, Arizona's Sonoran Desert, the dense tropical rainforests of Central America, and the dry, thorny scrublands of Patagonia. Researchers have documented cougars in palm oil plantations in Colombia, in semi-deciduous forests of the Yucatan Peninsula, in lower montane forests of El Salvador, and in the river basins of the Magdalena River Valley. Wherever there is adequate cover for stalking and enough prey to sustain a large carnivore, you will likely find a cougar, or at least evidence that one has passed through. The key habitat requirements are straightforward: cover and prey. Cover refers to the combination of terrain and vegetation that allows the cougar to remain hidden while stalking. Steep canyons, rock outcroppings, dense brush, fallen timber, forest edges. Deer are the cougar's primary prey throughout most of its North American range. Mule deer in the west, white-tailed deer in the east, and both species, wherever their ranges overlap. In South America, the diet becomes more varied, with smaller mammals, rodents, and even camelids and spectacled bear cubs entering the menu. But no matter where they live, cougars need dense concentrations of prey and enough rugged, broken terrain to approach that prey without being detected. Historically, cougars ranged across the entire breadth of North America, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The arrival of European colonists changed everything. Viewed as threats to livestock, competitors for game, and symbols of the untamed wilderness that settlers were determined to subjugate, cougars were hunted, trapped, poisoned, and shot on sight for 3 centuries. Bounty programs accelerated the slaughter. By the early 20th century, the cougar had been effectively eliminated from the entire eastern half of the continent, with the sole exception of a tiny, battered population clinging to survival in the swamps of southern Florida. Today, viable breeding populations in the United States are found in just 16 states, almost all of them in the West. The cougar's latitudinal range has shrunk by more than half from its historical extent, but within its remaining range, the cougar has shown remarkable resilience. And in some areas, populations have rebounded significantly since the era of unregulated killing ended in the 1970s. Conservation biologists classify the cougar as a keystone species, an organism whose ecological influence is disproportionately large relative to its population density. The cougar's keystone role stems from its position as an apex predator that interacts with an astonishing array of other species. Research has documented the cougar linking to 485 other species across multiple trophic levels through direct predation, through the carcasses it leaves behind, and through the competitive pressure it exerts on other predators in shared habitats. The cougar's relationship with deer is the most visible expression of its ecological importance. By preying on deer and elk, cougars prevent herbivore populations from growing beyond the carrying capacity of their habitat. In areas where cougars have been removed, deer populations typically explode, leading to overgrazing that strips vegetation, degrades soil quality, and drives out the hundreds of bird, insect, and small mammal species that depend on that vegetation for food and shelter. The eastern United States provides a stark object lesson. The overabundance of white-tailed deer that has devastated forest understories, decimated native wildflowers, and caused billions of dollars in agricultural and vehicular damage is, in large part, a consequence of the historical elimination of cougars and wolves from the eastern landscape. Cougars also exert what ecologists call a landscape of fear effect. The mere presence of a cougar in an area changes the behavior of herbivores. Deer feed less aggressively, move more frequently, and avoid concentrated browsing in any one location. This behavioral shift reduces grazing pressure and allows vegetation to recover, with cascading benefits for soil stability, water quality, and biodiversity. The cougar's carcass economy provides yet another layer of ecological service. When a cougar kills a deer and caches the carcass, that food source becomes available to a long chain of scavengers and decomposers. More than 200 species have been documented feeding on or benefiting from cougar kills, from ravens and magpies to beetles, worms, foxes, and even bears. The nutrients from a single deer carcass, distributed by the cougar's habit of dragging kills into sheltered areas, enrich the soil and support plant growth in ways that ripple outward through the entire ecosystem. There is also evidence that cougars serve as a natural check on chronic wasting disease, a devastating prion-based illness that has been spreading through deer and elk populations across North America. Because cougars preferentially target weakened and sick animals, they remove infected individuals from the herd before those animals can transmit the disease further. And their digestive systems destroy prion material that would otherwise persist in the environment. A particularly compelling study estimated that reintroducing cougars to the eastern United States could prevent roughly 22% of deer vehicle collisions, saving an estimated 5 human lives, preventing 680 injuries, and avoiding $50 million in damage annually. The cougar, in other words, is not just a predator. It is a public health asset. Despite being an apex predator, the cougar does not reign unchallenged across its range. It competes with, defers to, and occasionally clashes with a variety of other large predators. And its position in the hierarchy varies dramatically depending on geography and circumstance. In the northern reaches of its range, the cougar's primary competitor is the gray wolf. Wolves and cougars pursue the same prey, deer, elk, moose, and their territories overlap extensively. Wolf packs can and do steal cougar kills, muscling the solitary cat off its food through sheer numbers. There are documented cases of wolf packs killing cougars, including a chilling account of a pack of 7 to 11 wolves killing a female cougar and her kittens. However, in one-on-one encounters, the cougar generally dominates, and there are multiple documented cases of cougars ambushing and killing individual wolves, including adult males. Wolves affect cougar populations in subtler ways as well. By dominating territory and depleting prey in certain areas, wolf packs force cougars to shift their ranges, alter their hunting patterns, and increase their energy expenditure. Studies in Yellowstone National Park have shown that the reintroduction of wolves has created a more dynamic and complex predator-prey landscape, with cougars and wolves partitioning habitat and prey in ways that are still being studied. Grizzly bears and black bears represent a different kind of threat, not as direct competitors, but as kleptoparasites that exploit the cougar's hard work. One Yellowstone study found that grizzly and black bears visited roughly 24% of cougar kill sites, successfully stealing about 10% of the carcasses. These losses represent up to 26% of a cougar's daily energy requirements, a significant tax on an animal that may go days between successful hunts. When a bear approaches a kill, the cougar almost always retreats. The size differential is simply too great to risk a fight over food. In South America, the jaguar presents a formidable challenge. Jaguars are the largest cats in the Western Hemisphere and outweigh cougars significantly. Where the two species coexist, jaguars tend to dominate, and researchers have suggested that competition with jaguars may explain why South American cougars target smaller prey than their North American relatives. In Florida, the American alligator adds yet another dimension to the cougar's competitive landscape, particularly in the waterlogged habitats of the Everglades, where the two predators share territory. Humans, of course, remain the cougar's most significant predator. Sport hunting is legal in 13 Western states, and between legal hunting, poaching, livestock depredation removals, and vehicle strikes, humans are responsible for the majority of cougar deaths across the species range. In Texas, the cougar is classified as a varmint, which means it can be killed without any restrictions, quotas, or reporting requirements. A designation that stands in stark contrast to California, where the species has been protected since a public referendum in 1990 banned sport hunting and allocated $30 million per year for habitat conservation. The relationship between humans and cougars is complicated by fear, and that fear is largely disproportionate to the actual risk. Since 1890, there have been only about 25 confirmed fatal cougar attacks on humans in all of North America. Roughly one fatal attack every 5 years across the entire continent. You are far more likely to be killed by lightning, by a bee sting, by a domestic dog, or by a fellow hunter than by a cougar. A 10-year study in New Mexico found that wild cougars who were not habituated to humans showed no threatening behavior toward researchers who approached within 60 feet in 94% of encounters. And in the 6% of cases where defensive behavior was displayed, nearly all involved females protecting kittens. Cougar attacks on humans are almost always the result of unusual circumstances. A cougar that has become habituated to human presence, a severely starving animal, or the misidentification of a small child or crouching hiker as prey. Children are at the greatest risk. Detailed research into attacks before 1991 showed that 64% of all victims and almost all fatalities were children. The state that has seen the highest concentration of attacks is British Columbia, particularly Vancouver Island, where cougar populations are dense and human-wildlife overlap is extensive. The cougar's preference for avoidance over confrontation cannot be overstated. These are animals that have spent millions of years perfecting the art of invisibility. They do not seek out human contact when they appear in residential areas, on porch cameras in backyards, crossing suburban streets at dawn. They are almost invariably passing through, following deer that have been drawn into developed areas by irrigated lawns, garden plants, and the absence of predators. The vast majority of these encounters end with the cougar moving on within hours, long before wildlife officers can even respond to the report. The International Union for Conservation of Nature lists the cougar as least concern, the lowest level of conservation threat. But that classification, while technically accurate at the species level, masks enormous regional variation and some genuinely alarming trends. The IUCN has estimated the cougar's total breeding population at fewer than 50,000 individuals. In Canada, the population is roughly estimated between 3,500 and 5,000. In the United States, approximately 30,000 cougars are believed to inhabit the western states, with Colorado, Montana, and California hosting the largest populations. California alone may harbor between 4,000 and 6,000 animals. Oregon reported a healthy population of 5,000 in 2006. Populations in Central and South America are believed to be substantially larger, but reliable estimates are essentially non-existent. The most dramatic conservation story in the Cougars world belongs to the Florida panther, a subspecies that came within a whisker of total extinction. By the 1990s, fewer than 30 Florida panthers remained, isolated in the swamps and forests of southern Florida. Less than 5% of their original range. The population was riddled with the consequences of extreme inbreeding. Kinked tails, cowlicks in the fur, heart defects, undescended testicles in males, and poor sperm quality. Roughly 21% of individuals had atrial septal defects, and over 60% of males were cryptorchids. Demographic models predicted a 95% probability of extinction within 2 decades. In 1995, in a desperate last-ditch effort, wildlife managers transported 8 female pumas from Texas to Florida and released them into panther habitat. 5 of those Texas cats successfully bred with Florida males. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Over the following decades, the panther population tripled. Genetic heterozygosity doubled. Survival rates improved. The incidence of kinked tails, cowlicks, and undescended testicles plummeted. The rate of atrial septal defects dropped from 21% to 7%. The rate of undescended testicles fell from 63% to 3%. This genetic rescue is widely regarded as one of the most successful conservation interventions in history. But recent research from UCLA and UC Berkeley cautions that the benefits may not be permanent. The harmful mutations still exist within the population. They are simply masked by increased heterozygosity, meaning both copies of a gene are less likely to carry the same defect. If the population remains small, currently estimated at around 200 animals, inbreeding could begin to reassert itself. Future translocations of outside pumas may be necessary to sustain the genetic health of the population. The greatest remaining challenge for Florida panthers is habitat. They are confined to a fraction of their original range, hemmed in by highways, development, and agriculture. Vehicle strikes remain the leading cause of death. In some years, more than 24 panthers are killed by cars on South Florida's roads. The future of the Florida panther depends less on genetics, at this point, than on whether humans can muster the political will to protect and connect enough wild land to give these animals room to live. A recent $1.5 million grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation aims to expand panther habitat beyond Southwest Florida through partnerships with private ranchers and landowners. A promising sign that the conservation community is recognizing the need to move beyond crisis management and toward long-term landscape-level planning. The Florida panther story also carries a broader lesson that applies to cougar populations everywhere. Small, isolated populations are genetic time bombs. Without connectivity, the ability for young animals to disperse between populations and introduce fresh genetic material. Even healthy-looking populations can accumulate harmful mutations that only manifest when inbreeding intensifies. The Florida panther nearly went extinct, not because it ran out of food or shelter, but because it ran out of genetic options. That same fate could await any cougar population that becomes too isolated for too long. No cougar in history has done more for the cause of conservation than a solitary male who spent the last decade of his life in an absurdly small territory in the middle of one of the largest cities on Earth. His name was P-22, and his story is both heartbreaking and extraordinary. P-22 was born around 2010 in the western Santa Monica Mountains, a fragmented patch of wilderness hemmed in on all sides by Los Angeles freeways, development, and urban sprawl. As a young male, driven by instinct to disperse from his father's territory and find his own range and mates, P-22 did something that stunned wildlife biologists. He crossed two of the most heavily trafficked freeways in America, Interstate 405 and Route 101, on foot. Considering that vehicle strikes are a leading cause of death for mountain lions in this area, the crossing was an act of extraordinary luck. He ended up in Griffith Park, a 4,200-acre patch of urban wilderness, best known as the home of the Hollywood sign. The National Park Service noted that Griffith Park's 9 square miles of habitat was roughly 31 times too small for an adult male mountain lion. P-22 had the smallest territory ever recorded for an adult male cougar. He would almost certainly never find a mate there, but he stayed. And over the next decade, P-22 became one of the most famous wild animals in the world. A National Geographic photograph by Steve Winter, capturing P-22 prowling beneath the Hollywood sign in the green glow of a trail camera, became an iconic image of urban wildlife. P-22 gained tens of thousands of social media followers. He inspired an annual festival. He was featured in books, documentaries, and on a limited edition Los Angeles Public Library card. He became, improbably, a celebrity in the city of celebrities. More importantly, P-22 became the public face of a conservation crisis. His isolation in Griffith Park perfectly illustrated the devastating effects of habitat fragmentation on large predators. His story galvanized support for the Wally's-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing, a 210-foot vegetated overpass spanning 10 lanes of the 101 freeway that, once completed, will reconnect the Santa Monica Mountains to the larger Santa Susana Range, allowing cougars and hundreds of other species to move freely between habitats that had been severed for decades. In December 2022, P-22 was captured after displaying abnormal behavior, wandering farther from his usual range, approaching humans, and attacking a dog. Veterinary examination revealed extensive injuries, including head trauma and damage to his right eye, consistent with being hit by a car. He also suffered from kidney failure, weight loss, and parasitic skin infections. He was approximately 12 years old, beyond the average lifespan for a wild cougar. He was euthanized on December 17th. His body was buried in the Santa Monica Mountains in a traditional ceremony led by members of the Chumash, Tataviam, and Tongva peoples, for whom mountain lions are regarded as relatives and teachers. The Wally's-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing which broke ground in April 2022, is his legacy, the most tangible and ambitious expression, yet, of what can happen when a single animal captures the public imagination and turns awareness into action. So where does the ghost cat go from here? The cougar's future is a study in contradictions. At the species level, it is not endangered. Its global population is stable enough to warrant a least concern classification from the IUCN. Its range, while dramatically reduced from its historical extent, still spans more than 100 degrees of latitude across 2 continents. Its adaptability, the same quality that carried it through the Pleistocene extinction, through centuries of persecution, through the loss of half its habitat, remains its greatest asset, but the challenges are real and growing. Human populations continue to expand into cougar habitat, creating an ever-tightening squeeze on the space, prey, and connectivity that these animals need to survive. Highways slice through migration corridors. Suburban development fragments forest and scrubland into isolated patches too small to support healthy populations. Trophy hunting removes thousands of cougars from the landscape every year, often disproportionately targeting the large, territorial males, whose genetic contributions are most valuable to the population's long-term health. The consequences of inbreeding, vividly illustrated by the near extinction of the Florida panther, are a looming threat wherever cougar populations become isolated. California's Santa Monica mountain cougars, despite living in one of the most conservation-aware states in the country, showed signs of inbreeding and faced a projected 15 to 22% probability of local extinction within 50 years before the wildlife crossing was initiated. And yet, there are reasons for hope. Cougar populations in some areas are expanding, not shrinking. Young males are dispersing eastward, recolonizing territory in the Midwest that has been vacant for over a century. DNA-confirmed cougar sightings have been reported in Wisconsin, Michigan, Missouri, and other states far from the species' current western strongholds. In California, the cougar is now protected as a specially protected mammal, and the construction of wildlife crossings is opening new possibilities for reconnecting fragmented populations. The Florida panther's genetic rescue remains one of the great success stories of modern conservation biology, a proof of concept that targeted, science-driven intervention can pull a population back from the brink. The cougar has been here for 11 million years. It has survived ice ages, volcanic eruptions, continental shifts, the rise and fall of megafauna, and 3 centuries of systematic human persecution. It has outlasted saber-toothed cats, American lions, dire wolves, and giant ground sloths. It has adapted to deserts, rainforests, swamps, mountains, and in the case of P-22, to the heart of one of the largest cities on Earth. The question is not whether the cougar can survive. It already has, over and over again, against odds that would have broken almost any other large predator. The real question is whether we will give it the space and the respect it needs to continue doing so, because in the end, the ghost cat does not need us to save it. It just needs us to stop closing the doors. And if you ever find yourself hiking alone in the mountains at dusk, and the hair on the back of your neck stands up for no reason you can explain, and you feel, somewhere deep in the oldest part of your brain, that you are being watched, you probably are. But do not be afraid. The ghost cat has been watching us for a very long time. It has had millions of years to decide what it thinks about us. And in most cases, it has decided that we are simply not worth the trouble. Sleep well tonight. And spare a thought for the silent, patient, ancient predator that is watching the moonlight from a ledge somewhere above you. Its amber eyes catching the starlight, its muscles coiled, its breathing slow and measured, waiting, as it has always waited for the perfect moment. Throughout human history in the Americas, the cougar has occupied a place of reverence in indigenous cultures that few other animals can match. The Cherokee called it Clandagi, Lord of the Forest. The Inca built their capital city of Cusco in the shape of a puma, honoring the animal as a symbol of power and the earthly realm. In Andean cosmology, the puma represented the middle world between the sky condor and the underground serpent. The Maliseet of New Brunswick called it Piteval, the long-tailed one. Native peoples across North and South America regarded the cougar as a relative, a teacher, and a spiritual guide. When P-22's body was buried in the Santa Monica Mountains, the ceremony was led by members of the Chumash, Tataviam, and Tongva peoples, who consider mountain lions sacred relatives. They sang songs, burned sage, and honored a wild animal who had lived his entire adult life, surrounded by 8 million people, without ever harming one of them. In that ceremony was a thread connecting 11 million years of feline evolution to the deep human need to live alongside the wild things that share our world. Not to conquer them, not to cage them, not to reduce them to trophies or statistics, but to let them be what they are. The cougar asks very little of us. A corridor of unbroken forest, a hillside where the deer still browse at dusk, a canyon where the stream runs cold and clear and the underbrush grows thick enough to hide in, a highway overpass planted with native grasses where a young male, driven by ancient instinct, can cross safely to find his own territory and his own mate on the other side. 11 million years, 40 names, one continent from pole to pole. The ghost cat is still out there. Let us make sure it stays.